Hi, this is Chuck Wood with another video. And before we get started, though, I got to ask the question, are you following and fishing? Are you applying what you have already learned, and are you passing it on, reproducing it with someone else? Let's keep at it so that discipleship doesn't become something like where our heads get bigger and our bodies are tiny, but we're actually applying and sharing what we learned. Today, I want to talk about the Moses-Joshua connection, power of discipleship. In this relationship between Moses and Joshua, we're going to see some very significant things happening that really helped Joshua become the man that he was. And we begin with this question. When Moses went up the mountain to receive the stone tablets with the commandments, who was with him? Now, generally speaking, most people will say God and Moses. But actually, someone else was up there with God and Moses on the mountain. Let's take a look at Exodus 24:13. So Moses arose with Joshua his servant, and Moses went up to the mountain of God. So Moses and Joshua go up the mountain. So they're together. Now, if we take a look at this next passage here in Exodus 32:15 through 18, we see them coming down together. Then Moses turned and went down from the mountain with the two tablets of the testimony in his hand, tablets which were written on both sides. They were written on one side and the other. The tablets were God's work, and the writing was God's writing engraved on the tablets. Now when Joshua heard the sound of the people as they shouted, he said to Moses, "There is a sound of war in the camp." But he, Moses, said, "It is not the sound of the cry of victory, nor is it the sound of the cry of defeat, but it is the sound of singing I hear." So here's Moses and Joshua coming down off the mountain. So Moses and Joshua were together during this time. So what's the significance? Well, the significance is that Joshua gets the front seat, the front row view of Moses and his relationship with God. Is it any wonder that Joshua turned out to be the man that he was? Let's see this in a little bit more intensity. What kind of impact do you think this kind of exposure to Moses had on Joshua? Well, let's take a look at Exodus 33:11. Thus the Lord used to speak to Moses face to face, just as a man speaks to his friend. And when Moses returned to the camp, his servant Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, would not depart from the tent. So here we see Joshua watching again Moses with this intense, personal, intimate relationship with God. And when Moses leaves the tent to speak to the people, Joshua is right there at the tent. He won't even leave it. And so he is in this front row seat of watching Moses relate to God. And of course, Joshua becomes a godly man as a result of that. So, who would be the most likely candidate for God to choose to lead his people when Moses is gone? Well, we'll see exactly what happens in Deuteronomy 3:27 through 28. God is speaking to Moses and he says this, "Go up to the top of Pisgah and lift up your eyes to the west and the north and the south and the east and see it with your eyes. For you shall not cross over this Jordan, but charge Joshua and encourage him and strengthen him, for he shall go across at the head of this people, and he will give them as an inheritance the land which you will see." So there's going to be a change of command here. It's going to go from Moses to Joshua. God himself is speaking to Joshua later. He says, "Now it came about after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, that the Lord spoke to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' servant, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, cross this Jordan, you and all this people, to the land which I am giving them, to the sons of Israel. Every place on which the sole of your foot treads, I have given it to you, just as I spoke to Moses." So the change of command is complete. Now Moses is dead, Joshua takes his place, and he will lead the people across the Jordan into the promised land. there's no indication that Joshua did for another man what Moses did for him. Now, this is an argument from silence, but let's follow this through and see what happens in subsequent generations. What is the apparent result of Joshua not having a man that he's training to take his place? In Judges 2, 7 through 10, we read this. The people served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who survived Joshua, who had seen all the great work of the Lord which he had done for Israel. Then Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110, and they buried him in the territory of his inheritance at Timnath-Heres, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gash. All that generation also were gathered to their fathers, and there arose another generation after them, who did not know the Lord, nor yet the work which he had done for Israel. It's kind of tragic. What ends up happening is the people are left without the knowledge of God, the knowledge of the Lord in that generation. And this is what this is how it's described in Judges 21:25. In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. So 2 generations after Joshua, there's a catastrophic failure in knowing God, in the knowledge of God. Catastrophic. And whether it was Joshua's failure or the elders of the next generation, we can't be sure, but what we're sure of is that there was a failure to disciple the next generation in the same way that Moses did with Joshua. And the end was a spiritual disaster. We must communicate not only the precepts and concepts of God to the next generation, but we must communicate how to reproduce this to the next generation. As Moses did with Joshua, Joshua needs to do with the next generation, and so on and so forth, so that the generations always have a representative that is reproducing the knowledge of God, the works of God in the next generation. Extremely important, and we've got to communicate not only knowledge, but reproduction from one generation to the next. So we come to following and fishing. The first thing is start following. You've heard the lesson. Here's my question. Do you have a Moses in your life? Someone who is pouring into your life, mentoring you, showing you how to relate to God, a godly man or woman who has a solid relationship with Jesus Christ and is passing that on to you. But not only that, they're passing it on in such a way that you pass it on to someone else. And that's my next question. Do you have a Joshua? Do you have someone that you're pouring your life into so that they will see Jesus clearly and be able to pass that on, pass him on to the next generation? If not, you need to begin to pray and seek and work so that you have someone who is pouring into you and you have someone that you are pouring into the next generation. So what I'd like you to do is relook at this, learn the Moses-Joshua connection, figure out how to draw your little mountain with your little Joshua on it, learn the verses, and I want you to share this with somebody else because that is part of going fishing. I want you to reproduce this. I'm going to be a good Moses, and I'm going to pour into your life in such a way that you pour into somebody else's life. Go find a Joshua and show them the Moses-Joshua connection. Hey, if you need help in discipleship, you need some coaching, you got questions, write me at my email, charleswood1@gmail.com, or Facebook me. Let me help you if I can. I hope this has been helpful, so keep making disciples.